City. I came out here to link up with my beloved brother, DJ. And DJ is responsible for all this good footage y'all gonna be seeing in New York and all across the world, because this brother has taken time out, called me up, brought me out here, put me in a beautiful hotel. You know, I gotta say thank you for that, my brother. And he said, we got to get these elders. So I was telling the brother yesterday that these elders should really be proud of brothers like you, because you don't see a lot of young men working with elders. This brother just been bringing me the elder, the elder, the elder. You know what I'm saying? House after house after house, working with the elders, keeping their information out there, and that is what's missing in the streets. We need the elders back out there to teach to our youth, to teach to our babies, and I think you are doing that, brother TJ. I commend you and your board, my brother. With that, I bring my brother Sutek to introduce the family.
Peace and Black Power, family. It's your brother Sutek. I think we're just going to have to change your name to TJ. All weekend. But to piggyback on what Sonette is saying, there's been a lot of conversation going on back and forth about the youth disrespecting the elders disrespecting the youth, and talking about the disconnect. And I think what Sonette is trying to say is that this is a perfect example of the youth and the elders working together to move our condition forward in a positive direction. And saying you need to be applauded for that. We're here in Atlanta, as the brother said, with an economic development cooperative, goes by the name of Us Lifting Us. All right, and they're down here doing some very, very positive work. And I want to pass the mic around so that they can introduce themselves. And one of the brothers is going to give you an idea of what Us Lifting Us is about.
Greetings, family. My name is Brother Kimbizi. I serve on the board of directors for Us Lifting Us.
Greetings, family, and I'm Hekima Kenyama, and I'm also one of the board members and an elder advisor.
This is Brother DJ Jordan. I also sit on the board of directors of Us Lifting Us.
Greetings, family. My name is Shinyeri Kenyama. I also serve as a board member for Us Lifting Us as vice president.
Beautiful name.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I know it was asked of me to kind of introduce ULU, Us Lifting Us Economic Development Cooperative. We have a nonprofit here in Atlanta called the African Community Centers for Unity and Self-Determination. We got started in 2003. And of course, last night we had a nice event in Southwest Atlanta around the predators in our midst, of course. But in 2011, we made a call for brothers and sisters to come together and to wrap our minds around economics. And we felt that the economic aspect of our movement had been, to some degree, neglected. And so the results of that think tank over the months, with experts coming in to advise us, also consultant attorneys and other professionals. In 2012, we incorporated, and then in 2013, we dissolved that initial corporation and formed as an LLC, as we are now. In other words, the institution is Us Lifting Us Economic Development Cooperative, LLC. Again, born out of the expression in the community that we need to step up to the plate and deal forthrightly with the economic imperative of us controlling the economics of our community. And so that's who we are. I'm not sure I need to go any further than that. But our mission, our aim is very simple. It is to control the economic life of our own community. And we feel that if we don't establish institutions that are focused on that, and that we ultimately are successful in controlling the economics of our community, then everything else that we think about and we do or attempt to do is suspect. You know, the foundation is us being able to take care of our basic needs as human beings. And that, to a large degree, fall within the economic arena.
So with that being said, and those out there who know me know that I'm in 100% agreement with what their mission is. What are the methods that you feel is necessary or that you're incorporating in your mission to accomplish your mission?
Let Brother Kimbezi speak to it from that cultural perspective, because I think that is oftentimes something that's missed in our conversations about economics on a broader scale.
Again, greetings, family. We're living in a historical moment that is profound, because it is the moment when it is necessary for a shift in the political and the economic paradigm. What I mean by that is that we're moving from a privately controlled and predatory competitive economic model to a cooperative, collectively owned economic model where the people are controlling the means of their production. In the words of Amilcar Cabral, it enables us, once again, as a people, to return to the process of being able to make our own history. We understand that economics and politics are two sides of one coin. And while we have focused on gaining political power so that we can name ourselves, define ourselves, speak for ourselves, rather than that being done by other people, the dimension that we are addressing through this economic development cooperative is to begin to control how ideas are shaped, how the society and the culture are formed, by recognizing that at the base of every society there's an economic system. And we are advocating and building a collective and cooperative economic system that is controlled by black people globally, whether they're on the continent of Africa or here in North America. We recognize the work that Dr. Maulana Karenga did in developing the black value system, and specifically the value of Ujamaa, which we defined in the Kwanzaa celebration as cooperative economics. The ability to control our own economics, to our own businesses and institutions, and to profit from them together. This puts more flesh on those bones, in that not only are we designing our own businesses, but we are building a large-scale cooperative model that is also the seed, if you will, the germ seed for a cooperative economy. And what I mean by that is, when you have an economy, Ujamaa, as we understand it, from the work that Mwalimu Julius Nyerere did, is familyhood at its root. And so what we say is familyhood that creates an economy. We are looking at the relationships of how our people are interacting one with another. Under capitalism, we're forced to objectify people. We objectify the women. We objectify the children. Everybody gets reduced to a dollar sign. Everybody's value is determined on how much money they got in their wallet, or how much money they think they can get out of their wallet. And we have lost sight of the intrinsic worth and value of people simply because they are created in the image and likeness of God. So we are trying to get back to our roots and build an economic system that values people for their God-given and human value, and begin to trade with each other and honor that value as we interact with each other, handling economic affairs.
You know, Dr. Amos Wilson told us in the Blueprint for Black Power that all economic systems are based on social relationships between people, right? How groups of people come together to decide how do they meet their individual as well as their collective needs as a group or race. And so, unfortunately, what we've been kind of pigeonholed into as people of African descent in this country is to attempt to do business according to someone else's value system, someone else's cultural construct. And so what happens is, when we participate in the very system that Brother Sutek and Baba Kimbizi laid out, a very predatory form of capitalism, it winds up destroying the very fabric of our communities. And so we no longer have these positive, holistic relationships to one another. And just like Baba Kimbizi said, we wind up getting reduced to dollar signs, completely objectified. And so us lifting us in the work that we do is really about the business of reversing that. We're not interested in having people outside of our race family practice our form of social relationships, but ULU is advocating that we internally as a race family understand the fundamental need to create a cooperative economy that does not cause us to compete against one another. We can get a lot more done by cooperating, you see, than we ever could competing against each other. So this is a call for us to re-socialize ourselves internally as a race family under the banner of cooperative economics.
So that's the cultural aspect of that is the foundation for your organization. What are like some of the methodology? I guess you'll speak to that. What is the methodology like? You know, the mechanics of how your organization wants to work. I know it's a work in process. So what are the mechanics of how you want it to work?
Yes, as our name indicates, us lifting us Economic Development Cooperative. And so there's a lot of instruction in that name. What we have done or in the process of doing as well, and projecting into the future, is to develop and perfect a method by which our people can aggregate or pool their resources, financial, skills, our energy, and other resources, and join together in a large-scale, cooperatively owned business enterprise. And first of all, as members, and then as stakeholders. So the idea is that we would aggregate our resources, invest in businesses in our local communities, for-profit enterprises, and that we would expand, duplicate, build, expand towards a goal of arriving at a point at which it became obvious to us and obvious to anyone else in the world that the area that we define as the black community, that we economically control that, we own that, and that's our turf. And that we also participate in the kind of synergy that would speak to the need of building a black economy. We feel that it's not just enough to focus on entrepreneurship and black business ownership and the support of that. We feel that it's also necessary for our business activity to have a steering mechanism or some kind of way to logically build it and sustain it so that it becomes a legacy for our children and our grandchildren. So the large-scale business cooperative gives us the ability to interject into the business activity in our community something large enough and with enough stakeholders in our community so that there is some measure of control for the economic activity in our community. We feel that just focusing on entrepreneurship and black business ownership, regardless of how big we build it in terms of that activity, if there wasn't some synergy that we could control, some steering mechanism, some rudder to that, then everything else would simply flow back to the larger economy, and we may not benefit to the extent that we could if that controlling aspect is there. On our website, there's one of the slides that says Garvey's return, and we use the image of a whirlwind. And so that also speaks to an economy as well, those swirls, those turns, those economic turns. And so I submit to you that the success of Black Wall Street and all the other Wall Streets that you talk about was not simply us doing business with each other. It was us doing business with each other within our own container. within our own economy. So the mechanics are simply all of us, members, ULU members from around the world joining as partners in a business model, also putting in capital, and becoming owners and stakeholders in the enterprise, and amassing the sums of monies that we need to fund businesses after business after business that we run and own as cooperative enterprises, secondary cooperatives. They will be owned by the members and managed by the workers. And so to grow that to the level at which it becomes evident, self-evident, and evident to everybody in the world that our communities are not up for grabs, and that we not only are in a position to pass down intergenerational wealth, but to also pass to future generations the mechanisms, the institutions, the management structure that created that wealth.
Off camera, you had asked me how my program was going, and I spoke to you, and I told you I got a good response from it, but it's going to require more education on the part of the people. How do you plan to educate our people so that they will realize the importance of us controlling that turf, all right? Because you couldn't go to China and do business with Chinese if they didn't want you in. You understand? They regulate their economy, you know, and most ethnic groups have barriers set up around their economy that allow in who they want in, and you do business with them on their terms. And that's what I'm getting, that you're saying you want to have that same type of control over the black economy, right? But right now, you know that if you're selling a product for $50, the Korean, he's going to come in and sell it for $35. And it's important that our people pay the $50 to start out until we could get to the economy of scales. What type of vehicles are you trying to use to educate our people to the importance of what your mission is? If you got any questions you want me to ask, let me know.
So to your question, as far as how do we look to educate our people, as far as a cooperative and what we're doing with Us Lifting Us, one of the things right now here today, we understand that the platform that you have is far-reaching. So interviews like this, also recordings, lectures, as far as the ULU community, which is on our website. Once you become a member, we educate our family internally. Because keep in mind, with Us Lifting Us, one thing is you have to be approved. You have to be of Black African descent in order to even be a member or stakeholder in Us Lifting Us. So when you talk about enclosing our community, that's one of the things that we use to do that. Not anyone, can be a part of this cooperative. So internally, we do a good job of educating our family with all the resources that we have. Externally, it's going to have to be individuals like yourselves who recognize what the imperative is, what our situation is right now, and say, I'm going to come down to Atlanta and I'm going to put you in front of my particular platform. We do a lot of one-on-one talking with individuals before they actually enter the co-op. Every Thursday night, members introduce others to the co-op. They're live doing a presentation every Thursday night, where after the presentation, individuals are able to do a Q&A. So this is not about something that's going to happen, it's not combustible. This is something that we have to work on. And you know that. We have to work on this continually. Questions have to be answered. Our people have to develop a level of trust with one another. So that takes time. And we know that. So that education piece is really, really important. But it's going to be that, like in the name, Us Lifting Us. And I think you say this in your video too. You say you weren't talking to everybody because you recognize that a lot of us aren't ready right now. But we are in a time where more people are becoming aware that at a point we won't have a choice but to turn in and to deal with one another and to love one another. Because either whether you look at it as a dysfunctional family or a functional family, we're family. And at a point, those of us that first us, that's represented in the name Us Lifting Us, we recognize it. And as time goes on, that second us, or those who may not be as clear, will come into the fold based on that slow growth, that education that happens, like I said, a lot of times one-on-one. For instance, we had a couple that became member owners or members of ULU. They haven't become owners in a sense of purchasing units, because that's how the mechanics go. They came here from Bermuda to sit at this very table and meet with us face to face while their child, played around, on the carpet. She was worried about that. I said, we're family. You bring your child, your husband, you sit down, and we have that dialogue. That's where the education takes place. Now, aside from that, we are in the process, because like you said, it's a work in progress. We are in the process of having that curriculum that will be available to everyone, whether you are a member or not. So that curriculum is a big piece. And as it being a cooperative, we have several individuals in the cooperative who can speak to that curriculum, help put that curriculum together. And I guess for me, that's one of the most important parts of the co-op, is that when you're introduced, even if you're not clear enough yet, the difference between the capitalistic model versus the co-op model, once you're introduced and things start to, marinate and you can see clearer, you begin to give of yourself to the co-op. If you've never written curriculum before, it doesn't matter. You begin to understand where you fit because you become a real stakeholder. So all of that, like I said, it's a slow growth. Some of us are very clear, some not so much, but we're in it for the long haul. I don't know if you're familiar with the Mondragon cooperative in the Basque region of Spain. That co-op started, I think, around 1955, 56, with about 5 people. At this point, they employ over 77,000 individuals within that co-op. So like I said, it's going to take time, but we're in it for the long haul. Our members are in it for the long haul. So.
In Dr. Claude Anderson's book, Powernomics, he speaks of a time when it's too late. We spoke about this last night. Under his estimation, I think the book came out in like 2001, 2005. Anyway, he said 2012, after that, black people will be a permanent underclass in this country. Right? So with that concept of it being, there will come a time when it will be too late. How are you moving forward to address that situation? Like, express your sense of urgency in what it is you're trying to accomplish, and like not necessarily a timeline, but in the next 5, 10, 15 years, like what is your plans to try to have implemented in that time frame?
That's a great question, and like we spoke about last night, we have really taken the time to sift through almost every single definitive work on black economics that we could find. So Dr. Claude Anderson is an essential part of what we do in terms of Powernomics. We also refer to the Blueprint for Black Power by Dr. Amos Wilson, the ISIS papers, many different perspectives and writings on economics. But to your point about the statement that Dr. Claude Anderson made about the permanent underclass, we recognize the need now to be in a position to offer our people something tangible. There are a lot of people talking about economics. There are a lot of discussions about black economics and entrepreneurship and things like that. But what Us Lifting Us is doing is offering a prescription on how we get out of this mess. And so it's going to take a system to bring us out of this quagmire that we're in. Okay? That's one part. But the other part, in terms of the sense of urgency, we all have occupations that we do, but all of us really, in terms of the board, we give so much time over to us lifting us till it's not even funny, because we recognize the urgency of now. To begin that process, like Sister Shanieri said, of educating our people on why it is important to be a part of a tangible process that liberates them economically. So to your point, the time is of the essence, right? And so I think one of the highest honors that we can pay to our ancestors and elders is to codify their work in institutions and organizations that live for multiple generations. So is there a need for Ulu to write a book? Eventually, but we want to write history where we again codify all of the works that have been written into an institution and organization that even if our children don't ever read the ISIS papers, right, they get it within their reality, how they circumnavigate this world exactly. And so they express it with every fiber of their being, right? And so that's really a part of the vision of Ulu, because it's almost like, and I was telling Brother Sanetta this last night, you know, when you're playing baseball and the coach tells you that you got to get in front of that line drive. You can't stop a line drive from the side, right? You got to get in front of it. In predatory capitalism, racism, white supremacy is really driving our people towards a solution. And we believe that the solution is us lifting us. We just have to be in position in front of our people with the glove open. They're coming because they really don't have a choice, to your point. You see? And as long as we're in position with a clear plan and process, we believe that we will win this economic situation.
Just to add to that briefly, you spoke of Dr. Claude Anderson and his warnings, so to speak, of us becoming a permanent underclass in this system. One thing I think that's important for us all to keep in mind, especially the younger folks, is really important to keep in mind that that's the permanent underclass by the dominant narrative. We have a totally different narrative as African people. And those of us who recognize that know that our building looks much different than us being the permanent underclass in the capitalistic system. So as things are occurring, and like we don't have a choice, we're building over here. So there will be no choice, like DJ said, there will be no choice but for us to turn into each other and come together. But that's why this is an alternative model to that dominant narrative that says we will be the permanent underclass. So some of that psychology, we all understand how racism, white supremacy is in our mind. It's a psychological thing. So when we take in information like that and talk about the fact that we will become the permanent underclass, we also have to keep in mind, according to the dominant narrative, that we become the permanent underclass in this country. But because we're building, we don't see that as necessarily this doom and gloom thing. And we need to come to the point where we don't have a choice and we have to turn in. So with all of the different things that are occurring socially, the time is right for it.
I think what Dr. Anderson was saying about us becoming a permanent underclass was in relationship to the immigration policies of this country and what they're trying to promote and present. You got 11 million undocumented illegal aliens in this country right now, and it's probably more, because when you look at their offspring are citizens, but they're from families from illegal aliens, and that 11 million is 25%, quote unquote, of our 43 million population. So that's a significant amount of people that they want to introduce into the country to compete directly with us for housing, shelter, clothing, food, and employment opportunities. So I think that's where he was going with us being the permanent underclass, that if we don't do something to uplift ourselves, us lift us, this is what's in the next room waiting for us. Can you speak to our mentality toward this immigration situation, because I think a lot of people are ignoring it, but I think it has a direct impact on what your organization wants to accomplish.
Thank you for the question and the clarity. I don't think the Korean community is concerned about that. I don't think that the Jewish community is concerned about the immigration. I don't think Chinatown is, because I don't think those communities are competing with anybody. They are building internal economies that speak to their culture and the needs of their people. I think the discussion about jockeying for positions of privilege or somehow classifications of reward in this system, as if it's someone is going to take our minority status away from us. You know, if we're talking about African liberation, it doesn't matter, you know, the immigration patterns or the waves of immigrants. We still have the responsibility to be in charge of our affairs to the extent possible. So when we talk about African liberation, or we talk about however the terms it is, so I would reject as being legitimate to our ultimate welfare the discussion about waves of immigrants, because again, I think the imperative is that we find a way to liberate ourselves from the shackles that we clearly identify. And the fact that somebody else outnumbers us or doesn't outnumber us, I think that's a situation where everybody who is subservient to the dominant narrative and the dominant forces are competing for the crumbs on the table. We're not competing. We feel that our model is a model of African liberation, ultimately. So I would respond to it in that way.
And also, just to piggyback on what Baba Hakima was saying, if you think about an economy, it is a system that allows people to manufacture, distribute goods and services, so that whatever the dominant culture is doing. But if they want to containerize our community to certain spaces, that's okay. Because inside of that space, we still have the means to create an economy. The question is how do we distribute our goods and services? What do we manufacture with our capacity and our resources? And so that those forces that are compressing us or concentrating us actually are doing us a favor, because now people they don't have the same ability to go beyond the community and to find employment in those other sectors. So one of the things that Us Lifting Us will do is to create jobs inside of these concentrated spaces and begin to economically relate to one another in non-exploitive ways, because that's been one of our problems. When we put ourselves in these job situations, we're getting ripped off. We're not getting paid what we're worth. But as we create, and that's back to Shay's point in terms of Mondragon, they started in a depressed community that had very limited resources. But in trading amongst themselves, they were able to build themselves up to an economy that generated, $24 billion, and is the 7th largest economy in Europe. I mean, in Spain. So internally, we have the potential to liberate ourselves economically. It's just a matter of shifting our focus and our perspective on, we're not woe is me, but we are this vast reservoir of wealth. We just have to figure out how to direct it internally as opposed to externally.
Yeah, that's a great question, Brother Reggie. And for us, in terms of Ulu, it's not an either or. It's both and. There are several things that we have to do should do and are doing. And so we agree with the brother's point in terms of taking over a city, right? But in order to do that, it has to be done through a systemized process. And so ULU, while we are building a cooperative, that's just one aspect of what we do. Just like Baba Kimbizi said, our ultimate goal is to build a cooperative economy so that we are no longer competing against anyone. That is beyond just taking control of a city. In other words, this has global ramifications where you have people, billions of people of African descent all over the world sharing in the work and responsibility of building and maintaining a cooperative economy. Okay, that's extremely important for us to understand. The other point in terms of discrimination laws, this is one of the things that we were faced with from the onset when we began to build out this process. ULU, or Us Lifting Us, is a for-profit business enterprise. No. Yeah, it grew out of a nonprofit. So it is a for-profit limited liability company that allows us the ability to decide who comes in and who doesn't. Because under our previous classification, we could not do that. And so a part of the mission of Us Lifting Us, just like Baba Hakima said, is to reinvigorate particular aspects or certain aspects of the Garvey movement. And we know that that was one of the largest organizations that we've ever created on this soil, in this space. And so a part of our mission is to continue the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey's work and legacy in the 21st century under a cooperative umbrella.
Thank you, Brother Reggie, for the question. There are areas of the United States where the sheriff is black, the school board is black, the mayor is black, everything is black. And there ain't no white folk, or very few, but there are no jobs as well. There's no economy. With ULU, we have the opportunity, by focusing on what we would generally call economics, to be able to go into those areas where those areas have been gutted, and to connect the rural and the urban and begin systematically joining those rural communities to the cities. A lot of times people will say, well, why aren't you focusing on land? Land is the base of economic wealth. Well, the fact is that we got land. A lot of black folk got land and growing crops, and sometimes they rot in the fields because the markets are not there for them, friendly outlets for them. So systematically, we can carve out our turf, our territory as we go. But at the base, we have got the thing that Sutek talked about in terms of education. And I would say that we have to create a large stakeholder base. A lot of people in our population have to actually feel that they're stakeholders, they're owners, they're participants in the process. Otherwise, you don't have it. If those roots are not dug deep within your culture and within your people, then you don't have it. At some point, we want to talk also about the proposed business models that we feature on our website and give a sense of how that impacts the community. And obviously, it will impact. Once you begin to be successful, or at least attempting to be successful in the business arena, you best know that you got to deal with the political aspects, zoning and ordinances and all kinds of things. So you got to deal with public policy to protect your economic interests. Right. Exactly.
Okay. Black America has an estimated $1.1 trillion buying power. I would estimate, I don't know, but I would estimate that more than 90% of that comes from working for the dominant society, government or private dominant society businesses. At some point, to achieve your mission, you're going to have to transition. You understand? You're going to have to transition that buying power, the source of that buying power, from the dominant society to our cultural. Right. Bringing in the fact that there's politics involved, the immigration issue involved, because if the immigrants come in and they compete with us for the jobs that we have now, that's going to fuel ULU, because that's what's going to fuel ULU, the jobs that the people have now. So you can make that transition, right? What is your vision for making that transition? You know, because you're going to have to rely on people with jobs in the dominant society to help fund ULU so that ULU can get people out from under that society.
Excellent question, and I just want to break the surface of that, and I'm sure they'll add to it. If you think about our communities as they are right now, there are grocery stores, there are gas stations, there are coffee shops, every business that's there, and many of those businesses employ our people. Those are businesses under the rubric of capitalism. So they're paid whatever they're paid per hour, and they do whatever they do with those resources. Just think those same communities, if they were operating cooperative businesses, so that the people in the community actually owned the businesses and could change the pay structure. So instead of me making $8 an hour, we reorganized the business. Now I'm making $15 an hour. All we did was change it from a privately owned and controlled entity to a collectively owned entity, and we reset the parameters of how we get paid. The local mechanic shop, instead of those mechanics taking home $10 an hour or $12 an hour, if the business supports it, that could be as much as $20 an hour. And the change would be that instead of the ownership residing outside of our community and siphoning that money out of the community, the people who actually do the work in those places would own that institution so that the money could stay in the institution. That's one of the primary things that changing from a privately owned model to a collectively owned model puts in place. Now, beyond that, ULU is also starting our own businesses. So that there's two things going on. We're changing the economic relationships of the existing businesses, and at the same time, we're bringing new businesses onto the platform. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you know, that's an excellent point, Baba Kimbizi. And going back to this conversation around capitalism, it's important for us to understand, and this is the thing that Baba Kimbizi mentioned, and I'll just add further emphasis, that historically there has always been a struggle between management and labor under capitalism. Okay, and when Baba Kimbizi spoke to the siphoning of those resources, that is something that takes place in every area of capitalist society, where you have a few people at the top who get very, very wealthy at the expense of people who work and do the labor. So they become a labor force for the comfort and convenience of that dominant society, going back to Dr. Claude Anderson. You see, and that's the beauty of it. When we are all equal, you don't have one person or one small group of people at the top dictating everything in every aspect of everybody else's lives.
No, I was just going to ask, going back to his question, can you do Target X? Can you explain Target X?
Yes, as a part of our presentation, and brothers and sisters can experience this for themselves by going to our website, which is usliftingus.com, and go to the home page, and about the middle of the page there's a rectangular play button that says "At last, a winning plan," and there's a 12 slide presentation that basically outlines our plan. One of the targets is what we call Target X. And over the coming years, we can't know how many years, let's say 7, 10, 12 years, 15 years, with our business base, and they are businesses, and we've got to realize they're cooperative organized businesses, but they're businesses that compete very favorably in the environment. And so with the success of our businesses in this country and throughout the world, we want to get to a place where we capture and redirect a minimum of 0.5% of that more than $1 trillion that flows through our fingers. 0.5% would put us at $5 billion a year in gross dollar of business. And we say that with a 1% net profit after all expenses, at that point we would be able to return to our members $50 million a year in terms of a direct return, of what people normally would call a dividend. And so by building businesses, expanding those into every industry, and in the aggregate being able to at least reach that goal. Now that's a meager amount, 0.5% of $1 trillion. But if we were successful, and we feel that we will be, just at that level, we would become the largest business enterprise in America. And that's not saying a lot. $5 billion a year is not a lot. But at least that puts us on the path. And so the goal is, we have an acronym called DAM, Decisive Action with Money. And what we want to do is build an enterprise that functions as a dam to stem the flow of those dollars through our community, and to use our businesses and the businesses of brothers and sisters in the community who we have a relationship with, where there is some synergy, so that we form a dam and then redirect those dollars in a systematic and planned way, so that we have a respectable percentage of that flow under our control, so that we can build the institutions and build a foundation that we all want to for future generations. So that's one target. And in our presentation, again, is 0.5%, or roughly $5 billion in gross terms from all of our businesses and enterprise. And we feel that at minimum, we should realize, after all expenses, including charity and endowment, we should recognize a 1% net profit. And so, because $1 trillion is so much, we have an exercise. If I can just quickly do it, $1 trillion is, most of us cannot fathom how much that is. But if all of us would just imagine someone placing $1 million in front of you now, and then the next hour another $1 million, the next hour another $1 million, and do that all week, all month, all year, at the rate of $1 million an hour, it would take you 114 years before you would reach $1 trillion. Again, at the rate of $1 million an hour. So that, I often say that any reasonable person, let's say they were from outer space, and they looked at us, and there was more than $1 trillion a year that flowed through our fingers, and we hadn't perfected a mechanism to skim off of that for our own empowerment, they would obviously know that we were insane.
I just laugh because we have some very, very, very intelligent people in our community. Yet, every other ethnic group has figured out a way to skim off that $1.1 trillion. And we haven't figured out a way. Well, let me not say that, because the black church is skimming off that $1.1 trillion. They getting their cut. You understand? You saw in my presentation, I broke down how we spend that $1.1 trillion, and contributions is a very, very large number in that breakdown. So why do you feel? Because see, there's a psychology at work here. You understand? Up until, I have my own theories on this, but I want to hear your perspective on it. One foot out of slavery, we knew what we had to do. You understand? All those black towns, Black Wall Street, Durham, North Carolina, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the many other black towns that sprang up 1 foot out of slavery, had us on the path to self-sufficiency. You understand? Somewhere around 1933, after the Great Depression, between 1933 and 1944, we fell off the tracks, and we've been manipulated, very heavily. Why? Like I said, I have my own feelings on what happened, but I'm curious as to, like, what do you guys think happened to us to stop us from trying to stay competitive in the financial field and allow every other ethnic group to come in and pimp us hard?
Well, I know, the board is chomping at the bit, almost fighting like bulldogs at a stake, to answer that question and to share our perspective, because these are things that we talk about all the time, as we strengthen our process, right? And we can never have these conversations without the 800-pound gorilla not showing up in the room. And the 800-pound gorilla is integration. Okay? And in terms of your analysis, integration became the process by which the black community got off the rails. And we have yet to recover from that, because Ulu takes the time to really explain how your culture really drives your economics, right? Because culture is really the basis of everything that you do. You know what I mean? Yeah. So without culture, there's really no need for us to even desire to live amongst one another. We have to have something of commonality that draws us together, and culture does that, right? And so what integration represented was an alien value system being imposed on the psyche or the mind of black people that said, hey, prior to, just like you said, 1 step or 1 foot out of slavery, we were already doing for self. But in the advent of integration, the dominant narrative said, you no longer have to do for self. We got you. But we got you according to our cultural value system. So in other words, we're going to take you completely out of yourself. And you're going to become melanated versions of who we are, based on your internal social arrangements and relationships with each other. So what we are acting out now, we are actually relating to each other as if we are white people. And we wonder why, existing in a system of racism and white supremacy, we're not getting anywhere. You cannot relate internally based on the basis of your oppressor and move 1 inch toward liberation. They're two contradictory things. You see, so what Ulu addresses from the onset, because this is why, again, we value people's opinion, their perspectives, and their unique way of thinking about economics, right? So we're not opposed to anything that people come up with. We know that that is extremely important to help strengthen this process. So as you ask the question, the reason why we reach out to this microphone so quickly is because we have done the work. You see, not only in conversations, but putting in constructs and models to help us achieve the goal.
And to add to that, Malcolm said that we were African descended people. He said black folks were catching hell not because we were AME or Methodist or elk or mason, black folks were catching hell because we were black. And he went on to say that we had to see and understand ourselves as African descended people. So what we have been witnessing over the last 100 years is the social engineering. And when Malcolm said to communities that we're African descended people, our response was, man, I ain't left nothing in Africa. And Malcolm's rejoinder was, why you left your mind in Africa. So when DJ mentions the cultural dynamic or the cultural component of us lifting us, what we're doing is recapturing our African mind, our African identity, and we are building institutions based on African philosophy and African thought. So we're not just in business mimicking European models. We are creating business models and other institutions based on African awareness and African consciousness about healthy ways that we can relate one to another. So we're not exploiting. We're not sizing each other up and trying to figure out how we can the fastest way to rip ourselves off or to rip somebody else. What we're looking at is how do we value all of our potential, and how do we collectively create the wealth of that and then pass it to ourselves and our children.
And just a quick comment. I'm going to give some homework, a little bit of homework for the family out there. I think it's really important. When I was younger, I didn't realize how important this was. But as an adult, you realize how important it is to look at his story and our story simultaneously. Like if you go back into the early 1930s and we're talking about integration, I encourage the family to look at the laws that were being put in place at that time in this country. You know, after the Great Depression and just during that time, what the mindset of the people who were in charge, what their mindset was, and how we reacted to it. And it helps to really bring home what we're talking about right here. Because some people can think about it conceptually, but you got to look in the books and look at the actual laws that were put in place. I told them, I think when I took a test, Uniform Securities Act, as far as being an investment advisory representative, and it blew my mind just the laws that were put in place based on the activities, the unscrupulous activities of the people who were in power. They put these laws in place to protect those interests. So if we look at that history and our story, just look at it year by year, if you will, and it becomes so clear as to the answer to your question and what we just described.
One other point, because you raised an interesting point a few minutes ago, and I commented about labor and management being at constant odds in a predatory capitalist environment. Sister Shaniere brought up a very important point, and I oftentimes studied the relationship between management and labor, right? And so after the Great Depression, the government put in place what was called the Glass-Steagall Act in a way to regulate the banking system. And this is just a practical example of what happens over time in a capitalist environment. So they put in place after the Great Depression, because the bankers had pretty much run the economy in the ground, they put in place the Glass-Steagall Act that separated commercial banks from investment banks in terms of the activity. So in other words, if you were wealthy, you could have your money invested by the brokerage houses, the Merrill Lynch, the Goldman Sachs and people like that, right? Because it was very volatile and risky, but because you were wealthy, you could do that. They wanted to protect the regular, everyday, working class person that had their money in the commercial banks, because they didn't want their wealth or their money being used to try to invest in things that were volatile, because their life depended on it, pensions and things like that. Now, management went to work for 30 years to undo the Glass-Steagall Act. You know who signed or did away with the Glass-Steagall Act? Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton obliterated the differences between the commercial banks and the brokerage houses like the Merrill Lynches. And I'm talking about commercial banks like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, SunTrust. You see, banks, traditional banks like that. So now, once that was obliterated, due to the manipulation by the bankers themselves, manipulating the president in terms of public policy, now the bankers could engage in predatory banking behavior again, or risky investments with regular people's money, blue collar folk. You see, and they did it for so long. Bank of America started engaging in credit default swaps and leveraging in derivatives with regular people's money. This is what Cheniere studies all the time. You see, Wells Fargo did the same thing. SunTrust did the same thing. And you know what happened over 15 years? They ran the economy in the ground again. So this is that cycle that now they're talking about another law to separate the two. And you know what? Once that law is in place, management or the bankers will go to work again to undo that. How do we change that? We change it by introducing a new conversation under the banner of cooperatives, especially as it relates to our people, because we are so heavily employed by the government. You see, post office, military, and things like that. We cannot afford the wealth that we have accumulated to be used in nefarious banking activities like derivatives, credit default swaps, leveraging, hedge funds, and all that. Most of our people don't even understand these exotic investments. You see, and then once the bankers crash the economy, they get a bailout. You get a pink slip. You see, so again, we have to introduce that new conversation because we cannot stand another generation to go through this.
We still going? Okay, let me try to be smart again here.
You asked a question about the black church, and that's a perfect segue to Brother Hakeem talking about our 10-point plan in the future.
Well, just before Brother Hakima talks about that, to your earlier question about how we lost the momentum coming out of slavery and we were doing for self, and then all of a sudden, two institutions in particular, the churches and the school system. And even though today in predominantly black communities, black folks control the churches and the school systems, the dominant thinking in those leadership groups is controlled by the dominant culture and the dominant society. It goes back to what Carter Woodson was talking about in Miseducation of the Negro. Those persons who came out of those colleges with the masters and the PhDs, because they had lost their identity as African-descended people and began to see themselves, as DJ used the term, melanated Europeans, the policies that they then put in place further eroded any sense of community, and now we find ourselves where we are today. And just one practical example, I live in DeKalb County. A business had bought and opened a service garage on the corner of Harrison and Wesley Chapel Boulevard. It had built a state-of-the-art car service shop. Had about 4 bays, even had a car wash attached to it so that you could get your car in there, get your brakes done, your whatever you needed done, and get it washed at the same time. The business thrived for a few years, and then it went bankrupt. And that state-of-the-art shop sat on that corner intersection for almost 10 years. Just the eyesore on the community. Now, keep in mind, we have black elected officials. We have 2 mega churches within spitting distance of this location. And in that 10-year span, no one had the idea to reopen that garage as a cooperative. We could have put those same mechanics back in there, owning the institution. Everyone in the community could have had ownership in the garage because we all have cars. We all have to get them maintained. And we could have worked out a preventive maintenance schedule where everybody could have come through there, got their car service on the regular. The mechanics would have had pay. We would have gotten our car service. The business would have thrived. It would have kept those dollars circulating in the community. But because we lack the consciousness that we are African-descended people, all we do, we sitting around waiting, who can we entice to come in and start a business. So who came in? Quick Trip. Put up a gas station.
To further to DJ's comment and your reiterating of it about us being melanated white people, I always say our best talent is working for our enemies. You know, and the truth of the matter is that you're loyal to who pays you.
Absolutely.
So you know, we have to be able to hire people. We have to be able to pay our people, because like you're saying, they're going to these schools, they're graduating with these MBAs and all of that, and they go to work for, you know, our enemy. I don't like to call them, I like to call our competitors, and they do their bidding. So, you know, a situation like you're saying with the garage, you know, that's in our best interest. It's not in the best interest of the people who our minds, who could, listen, we got people out there who could say, you know what, I'm going to start a cooperative. All it is I need to go around to the people in the community, give them a proposal, they sign in, they put $100 in, we could buy the property. You understand? And do it. And have a document that everybody's involved in, and boom, we own it. And what you're saying could come to fruition like that. You understand? But, you know, the people with that mental capacity work for somebody else. So we gotta, you know, with ULU, with my organization, and other organizations like ours, you know, I think the first thing we need to do, and I put up a video a couple of days ago, calling for all our organizations to come together. You know what I'm saying? And have a dialogue, like we're sitting here now, like we were doing earlier. You know, because I think this transition is going to start with the economic development companies. You know, it's got to start with us, and then everything else will come on board. But I want you to speak about that black church issue that DJ was talking about.
Well, when you brought up the churches, of course, it immediately we thought about one of our documents. As a matter of fact, our leading document. When you go to our website, again, usliftingus.com, the first thing you see is the ULU 10-point appeal and plan. And what that 10-point appeal and plan does and is lay out the foundational thinking and the platform from which we are building this alternative economy. To explain ULU, there are many facets to it, but the 10-point appeal and plan puts on one page our mission, our idea, and to some extent, our method. We think that it's imperative that we develop an exact method for how we take control of the economics of our community. And that 10-point appeal and plan lays that out. The second point on that, well, the first point is that as African people, we take full responsibility for the economic destiny of our communities and our nations. And if we don't have the intent to take responsibility for our economic destiny, then it's not going to happen. Now, luckily and fortunately, there are a significant number of us who are ready to step up to the plate. They just need a plan. And so the second part of that 10-point plan asks that as individuals and institutions, we join together in a large-scale cooperatively owned business enterprise to pool our resources. But we go further in that clause, in that second point. We say that we as persons and institutions, and then we have in parentheses, especially the black church, join as members and stakeholders in a large-scale cooperatively enterprise. We understand historically what the church has meant. Obviously, that's a big task to turn many of them around, but some of them are ready to step up to the plate and to aggregate the resources of their congregations to participate in a a global enterprise owned and controlled by African people. So that was the church sect. But so when people go to our website, and the first thing they see is the 10-point appeal and plan, if you would put your cursor over that document and click it, it turns into a PDF and you can print it out. And I encourage people to print out several copies and just exchange them with people in the community as you move about, because those 10 points, in my opinion, should become the economic plank of our global movement, or at least our national movement for those Africans in America. And by the way, we have members in Ulu now, in Canada, in the UK, in Bermuda, and in Haiti, but we have American citizens, Africans, stationed all around the world who are also members. But we're formatted in such a way that we can have Ulu members and stakeholders in every country. So the 10-point appeal and plan provides for us a one-page snapshot treaty or presentation on what it is that we must build, in my opinion.
And just to kind of summarize Baba Hakima's point, you know, the black church has over $250 million that it collects in tithes and offerings every week, right? So it would not even make economic sense to advance the whole notion of cooperatives and then exclude that institution. You see, so we know, we identified early on that we could not build Ulu to the capacity that it needs to be built without the black church. So that education, like Sister Shinyere mentioned, has to take place. So we support your efforts in bringing those economic minds together. Matter of fact, I want to work with you to make that happen, because these types of conversations that are solutions-based are critically important. We cannot talk about economics enough. You see, and again, to further emphasize the beauty of cooperatives is that we know people come into Ulu from many different walks of life, many different perspectives, right? Things that they've thought they understood that really didn't make sense. But when we have these conversations on our call and in our member meetings, we walk away reinvigorated, recharged, because we know at the end of the day, we are on the same page in terms of African liberation economically. And as long as we stay true to that mission, we will be okay. One other thing I want to say, for those of you who are watching online, and we definitely thank you, our website is usliftingus.com, usliftingus.com. We have active membership, or the basic membership for Ulu is $50 a year. $50 a year is all that is required to maintain an active membership in this organization. We have a number of brothers and sisters who are stakeholders that have decided to take the next step and actually invest into the building and constructing of black-owned business enterprises that will be the anchor in our communities, that can prevent a lot of the regentrification that we see happening in every major city across this country, because economics plays a big role in how that happens in terms of community destabilization. So this is a practical way of anchoring the community and keeping it whole. And we have one other point I'll mention. We have our annual member meeting coming up on March 19th here in Atlanta. So for those of you who are interested in being a part of Ulu and just coming out and listening to our unique perspective on co-ops in black business, we certainly invite you to come out, and it will be held at the Shrine of the Black Madonna on March 19th. So we have that, we will be posting that information on our website in the days to come. And as always, we appreciate the family for taking the time out to listen to the Us Lifting Us board. And like Brother Hakima said, we are in several different countries, and we have some of the most creative minds in this organization, because we know we have untapped genius in our race family. It's time to pool those resources, time, energy, values, all of those things into a collective process that, when implemented, leads to liberation.
All right. Thanks a lot, family. I appreciate that information that you're giving us. The people in the chat room, they love it. And this is going to be the best part also, what we got coming up right now. They don't make women like this anymore. We don't hear about sisters like this anymore that stick by their husband, that fight for the liberation of their man. And this is what we want to go right into. This is the best part that I would like to hear as well. You know. So, my brother, I would like for you.
Like a 60-second or 2-minute break.
Yes, we can.
Set everything up for the next
But I want you to let the people know what we are setting up for and what they this is a special treat what they're gonna get right now. Talk about it.
Yeah, what we have coming up for you, family, is actually right now is what Brother Sanetta and I have called an African love story.
Right.
And for those of you who are, connected to other people online via social media, I would just simply encourage you to get them to view this live stream. It will eventually be uploaded on YouTube, but this particular story is something that is so phenomenal. I really want as many people as we can to hear it live, right. Because it's something that once you hear it, you're going to talk about it with your family and in your community. And so we're going to go right into that particular part of the conversation because it also underscores the type of people that we have amongst us that oftentimes we don't even know. We have heroes and sheroes in our midst every day, and because they're so humble and they just go about the work and live a quiet life on behalf of their people. Oftentimes these people are not even acknowledged, but they are literally walking history books because they have made history themselves in the work of African liberation. So we have, brothers and sisters, we're going to have this conversation with Baba Hekima Kenyama and his lovely wife, Mama Tamu Kenyama. They're going to give us the history of their involvement in the work to liberate our people. And this will be a phenomenal story, especially for the sisters. Because like Brother Sanetta and I said, they just don't make them like this queen no more. You know what I mean? This is something that if we could bottle it up, Ulu, we would have that $1.3 trillion. You know what I mean? If we could bottle that up and sell it. But again, brothers and sisters, we highly encourage you to reach out to the family via social media. You don't want